So I stole the Holly off of the 68 Charger to put on the Duster to go to the track a couple weeks ago. So now we've got duct tape drags coming up. I need to get the Charger cleaned up and running again. So number one is we need to get a carburetor back on this car. So there's the rebuild kit, there's the carburetor. So about 20 years ago was about when I used my first Demon. I borrowed it from a friend. It was a 650 vacuum secondary. I put on a 360 with 318 heads. And my old D100, it ran great. It ran awesome. And so I bought a couple of Demons since then. And they run awesome, especially wide open throttle. I did have some troubles with stumbling out of the hole. You know, we were driving the car, so off idle it would cough and then stumble on me, and then of course it would take off fine. You know, sometimes I'd have to flutter the throttle a little bit to get past that point. But what I didn't understand back then was all the relationships between the settings in the carburetor, like between the idle screws, your timing, your idle set point, the accelerator pumps. So there's a relationship between all that stuff, and you have to get all of it kind of in sync together. So I'll take the carburetors apart, and then I usually take all the small pieces and I'll soak them in a fresh can of Chem Dip, and then all the larger pieces, I have older Chem Dip, I'll soak those pieces in a bucket. All right, so we'll let that soak in Chem Dip for 24 hours, come back out here tomorrow, clean everything up and put it back together. And by the way, if you're interested in going to Duct Tape Drags, I suggest you buy your tickets soon. Last rumor I heard, there was less than 80 something tickets left. I'm gonna put a little picture here of the flyer so you have the dates and all that kind of stuff. Maybe a link to the website, I'll put that in the comments, and a link to the website down in the description below. After I soak everything for 24 hours, I will rinse everything off in hot water, and then I'll blow all the orifices out with some carb cleaner, and then you know, let it dry out, and then put everything back together with fresh gaskets. All right, so you see that transfer slot right there? So a good set point for this, when you're putting a carburetor back together, is to have that basically slot look square. So not a rectangle like that, not where you can't see it, but square. There's the screw for this side, the primary, and you can see there's the screw for the secondary. So we're gonna do the same on both. About right, it's about square. Flip it over, do the secondary side, same thing. We're going to turn the idle screw here. It looks about square. I like to smear a little grease on the gaskets. You know, the rebuild kit was like 50 bucks, so it's not cheap. And they make this stuff. I mean, they do a pretty good job of sealing, but man, you know, this stuff tears apart when you take it off, and then you got to put new ones. I'm sure part of that is by design. All right, so I just put a little red grease in here just to make it slippery to get through this hole. I'm gonna try to pull and push at the same time. That's cool. That one went in without me having to tug on it, which, you know, they like to tear, so be careful. I think with the grease on there, it helped pop right through, so that's good.
Same thing on this diaphragm. I'm gonna smear a little grease around it just so it doesn't stick if we need to pull it back off. Make sure you have this arm facing down or facing up, however you're looking at it. You need it to be on this side of this arm. And I'm going to set the depth of the needle and seat just below the surface of this lock nut. We'll have to adjust all this later once we get some fuel in it. One of the beauties of the Demon is they put sight glasses on the bowls. This is sort of what I'm used to, is that style. I haven't seen that style yet. And I haven't seen this, so I don't know. This is probably an older bowl, I'm guessing. We get some fuel in the carburetor, we can see where the float ball levels are, and then we could adjust it when we get there.
Once I have the square transfer slot opening on both the butterflies, the primaries and the secondaries, then I'll set the idle screws to 3/4 of a turn, and then I'll take out any slack in the accelerator pumps, and that's usually a pretty good starting point.
A little grease in here, just so it seats really well, seals, it doesn't tear.
And then on the needle and seat adjustment, man, that's really always kind of a shot in the dark. So you're gonna see later in this video that I had them set way too high. It was basically flooding the engine.
We want to make sure there's no slack between the accelerator pump arm and the linkage. So this side looks good. There's pretty much zero gap there. So I'm gonna leave that one alone. See, this side's got gap. So that gap between the arm and the linkage. So we got to take that out. How you do that is, this has a nut with a nylon insert. We just loosen this up. So it just takes a couple of 3/8 here. Loosening this top one lowers this bolt because there's a spring inside of there. It's basically constantly pushing against that bolt. If you tighten this, it pulls the bolt up. If you loosen it, it lets the bolt push down. Okay, I think that's good. So whenever you're adjusting the idle screws and adjusting the butterflies, that affects this relationship between the throttle linkage and the accelerator pump. Whenever you make an adjustment to the idle, this one or this one, you have to double check your accelerator pump linkage just to make sure you didn't add slack or you put a load against it, which will take away from some of your accelerator pump travel, which you don't want to do. So anyway, this one's good to go. So I guess this is a here we go again moment. We got duct tape drags coming up. I want to take the 68 Dodge Charger, so we got to get the carburetor on it. We have to look at the brakes, try to get brakes, and hopefully we can make some passes at the track with it. All right, we got the carburetor on. I just remembered I need a 6-pack throttle cable to fit with that bracketry I have. The throttle cable in there now is, and it's a bit too short, so I'm not gonna have full throttle if I leave that cable in there. It just doesn't have the travel that the 6-pack cable has that I need. I had ordered one, bought it from Bosch, I think, and I still haven't got it. And that's been shit, man. 3/4 of a year or something like that. Anyway, I'm gonna have to go follow up on that, go through my email. See what's going on there. Maybe see if I can find one from somewhere else. I have a feeling it's in back order. All right, it's another day. Got a lot of crap to do in a short time to get it done. So I went and got some gas so we could start up some cars and move them around. All right, so we got to get a battery in the satellite, drop some gas down the carb, get her fired up, move her, get her out of the way, put her over by the D100, and then fire up the charger. Still fires right up, it's great. So you saw how the fuel was shooting up out of the vent bowls? That's indicative of the needle and seat not shutting off. So when I put it back together, I didn't put the needle and seat down far enough. So we're gonna adjust that now. Basically, you're gonna turn it clockwise to turn it deeper. Just a total guess how much. It's still shooting out, so we gotta close it down a little bit more. Try again. We gotta be getting close. The back looks like it's closing. The front still needs more. All right, so the rear was adjusted too high still. I could see it super wet in here, so that's why it was flooding. So I wanted to show you the eyeglass. All right, front seems pretty high still, right? And let's look at the back again with the light. That one's pretty high too. All right, so we'll adjust both of these guys down a little bit. Try 90 degrees. You ever work on a car and have like some random thoughts and memories? I'm 51 years old, and 41 years ago, I sat in this very spot, in this very car. I was 10 years old when my dad drug this car home. And I remember sitting in the car. It was at first parked, he parked it out on the street in front of the house. And I remember sitting in here, just playing with it, pretending I was Bo Duke driving the Charger, you know. And then so like a random thought was like, wow, I think this car kind of marks the beginning of that crazy Mopar obsession that I've had, you know, from a physical sense. As far as being into Mopars, or the hobby, the origin of the hobby is probably in the Dukes of Hazzard. You know, I loved that show as a kid. You know, all I wanted was a Dodge Charger. That was like my only goal in life as a kid. And you know, my dad showing me pictures of his first 68 Charger, and it was a spring color red. They think they called it Charger Red, but it wasn't a common color, and it only came out half year, you know, mid-year. So basically it's like a dark orange color, you know, kind of fits with the General Lee theme. In fact, I remember telling some of my friends at school that my dad actually owned a General Lee car. And then he bought this car when I was 10, drug it home. You know, obviously this is a 68, the General Lee was a 69, but same body, same car. And I think that definitely started my obsession with owning this car someday. And I bugged my dad from that day on to sell me this car, or at least to leave it in his will as an inheritance, you know. And finally he let it go in the early 2000s and sold it to me. So this car has been in my life for 41 years, or around my life for 41 years. It's pretty cool. It's like the whole story's kind of come full circle.